So, okay, well, let's get into it. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you being here, especially before you're embarking on your next season. We had a lot of conversations last year, kind of during your first season. Clearly, big year for you. You were successful. It was fun to be able to watch you play from like a best friend point of view. Being able to turn on the TV and you know, all of us as a group, like our group of friends, being able to tune in on games, and then the text threads like going when you hit a nuke or you do something cool. But now I kind of wanted to really dive in on that today. And I think a side of, you know, there's a side to what we see as our friend group, right? And that's your more like inner circle. And then there's a side that like the media sees, for example. I think there's such a misconception with professional athletes in general, and, you know, especially more high profile athletes that are on social media pages all the time, that maybe like MLB or the NBA or the NFL, like they want those younger athletes to be able to represent the organization. And you're one of those guys. Moving forward, having the season that you had, I kind of wanted to reflect on that and then talk about maybe how your mindset's changed, you know, going about this year or maybe even your off season. But let's start with kind of reviewing last year, and we can dive into some deeper details of maybe some things that, you know, people don't quite think about when it comes to you, and they only see you as a baseball player. But, you know, you have to understand you're also still a human being too.
Yeah. I think, well, the first thing is you and, you know, everyone in our friend group has the kind of the unique perspective of being able to see what the media sees. Also, you guys are talking to me every day, and so you get to see my perspective, and then you get to see what the public sees, and so you guys have a very cool outlook on that, which I think is awesome, because we get to joke about it and everything. But I always relate kind of this last season to like a freshman year of college or a freshman year of high school. Like it's different, but it's funny how life just kind of repeats itself, and you find these like reoccurring patterns of being like a younger guy on a team, trying to fit in with a new group of guys, and kind of being in unfamiliar territory. And I felt like last year that's kind of what it was, but I felt like I'd kind of been through that, like freshman year of high school, freshman year of college, and you're kind of just doing it again with a new group of guys. But at this time, like, you're at the highest level and you're trying to compete, and it's just a different dynamic when guys have families, and, you know, everyone's got their own lives. Everyone lives in different parts of the country or countries, and so when you bring that all together and try to find a team that's willing to put that aside for a second in order to, you know, achieve a common goal of winning, it's really interesting. But you know, this last year's kind of it was a good year, and I'm excited to dive into it.
I love it. Well, let's start there, kind of what you were talking about with the team dynamic, because, and I want people to understand, especially like in professional baseball, you have guys from literally all over the world, not just the country, like what you were saying. And so there's language barriers at times, just things that you don't really account for, you know, especially like where we went to college, being at Oregon State, you know, growing up in a small town. It's like you don't have some of those experiences that you do maybe at like the main stage. How was it when you got called up? I mean, clearly, really exciting moment. Everyone was pumped for you. You were pumped. But when you finally started to like settle in, and I would say, I don't know, maybe like a couple months into your season, how was that clubhouse dynamic? Because you have a lot of guys on that roster that, you know, are pretty mature. They've had, you know, a couple years under their belt. And you got like what you're talking about. Everyone's pretty much married. They have families, right? They have their own kids. How does that look from your perspective? Was that transition difficult at times?
Yeah. It's crazy. You can kind of see the ups and downs of the season looking back, and you know, the Orioles the past couple of years haven't won. You know, they've always been kind of at the bottom of the league for the last couple of years, and there was a point in the season I remember where we went on I think it was a 10-game winning streak, and it was during that time almost that you almost felt that like shift in attitudes. Like guys were going around the clubhouse like, oh, like we're never gonna lose another game again during that time, and we got to 5 wins and 6, 7. And everyone's kind of just like, all right, like we can do this, and as the season went along and we kind of had a shot at playoffs, you just felt the momentum like continue to go, and guys were trying to win every game, and we're fighting, and that's a fun clubhouse to be a part of, right? Because in a losing clubhouse, it's not just losing, it's guys are upset, guys are angry, there's turmoil, and it just becomes one of those things that you just don't really want to be around. Like, you're not excited to come to the field, but when we were winning and making a playoff push, that was exciting, and that's a fun group to be around.
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said too, especially the city of Baltimore. Everything that you've told me, like, that's a fan base that they love their sports, and they do love the O's, and they want the O's to be successful. You got a lot of blue collar people there, and they live and die by those games. And so now this kind of brings us into this next dynamic, being a first overall draft pick. How do you think the fan base viewed you when you finally did get called up? Like, did you feel a lot of those expectations kind of weigh down on your shoulders, or was that something that you necessarily didn't really worry about?
Well, that's a question I get asked a lot too, is like expectations, and like I talk about stuff kind of repeating over time. Like, it felt like, or I guess it's kind of felt like for the past couple of years, like the expectations of coming into my junior season of college being the number 1 projected
Same
pick.
concept.
Like, I think it would have been a lot tougher. Like, my junior year was really tough to kind of understand like how I wanted to face those expectations, because I really had no reference point for those kind of expectations. I didn't know how to deal with it, and so I basically just took an approach of I took an approach at the beginning of the season. I said, I'm going to stick with this and see how it goes, and it worked. And so I just have kind of kept that throughout the minor leagues when I was the number 1 prospect, and then once you get to the big league team, then it's okay, we're trying to win a World Series, so those expectations don't really like subside, they just keep going. And so you really got to find a way to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. And I think honestly, it's like, we've talked about this a lot, like dealing with expectations. Like, I talk to you a lot, I talk to my friend group, I talk to my family, I value their opinions, and like, we place goals on ourselves to be the best human beings and baseball players that we can be. And, in order to do that, we put in the most work we can. We work as hard as we can on a day-to-day basis, control what we can control, and then as you do that, it feels like those expectations, or the noise from those expectations, kind of just subsides, because you just don't really give it the time of day. You're so focused on being the best version of yourself.
For sure. Well, and I think even like tapping in on that, baseball in general, like it's kind of funky because it is a team sport, but it's also like, it's very individualized, like especially at the professional level. And you're paid based on your performance at the end of the day. It doesn't matter if you're, a highly touted prospect, or you're a guy that's just grinded his way up. Like, it's still like you are paid based on your performance. I think there's this misconception that, like what you were referencing, that, you have an inner circle. We have a lot of conversations during the season. Just like you come to me and maybe you need to vent about certain, things that are happening during the season, or you go through times that are frustrating, because there are ups and downs with anything. There's ups and downs in what I do too with work. It's the back and forth that I think I really have appreciated this last year, because I think for both of us, me transitioning out of baseball and you transitioning to like a higher level, there's so much unknown, and it's like almost that concept of, man, I'm going to take a leap of faith kind of into this darkness. Like, I know there's a bottom, but I don't know maybe how far it is, and like, you have to take that jump, but also understand that there's other people that are willing to help you too. Like, you don't have to feel like you have to go through this situation completely by yourself. Because I think the power of even hopping on a phone call, and we're thousands of miles away from each other. It's like, those are those times I think about that I'm like, man, yeah, I need to have a conversation with Rutsch, right? Or I need to have a conversation with some of my group of friends. because it's like that's what helps me get me through those tougher times and things that, maybe I can't just internally process by myself, where it's like, I've talked about it, on social media with my TikToks and stuff. As far as on the mental performance side, it's like, man, the ability to vent to someone, and because it helps you internalize, and organize your internal thoughts, where now you're not confused because I actually have to project to you.
Yeah.
Because now that's going to in turn help me internally too. So I kind of wanted to talk about that. Like
I love that. And I think kind of like what that ties into is like, we talk about working as hard as you can, being the best version of yourself. That doesn't mean there's not going to be struggles in that. Like,
for sure,
you go through mini slumps, you go through big slumps, and having a way like to process that, cope with it, and then also having a method to bounce back. So we go from kind of teetering in the middle to, okay, I'm bouncing back. And that's the thing I love most about our friend group, because like you said, venting, like for you guys, I really figure out like what about me is upset, like where do I actually need to reflect on and like be more aware on. And I think I trust you guys so much because the perspective you guys have always comes from a place of like no emotion, because I'm just so invested in usually what's going on that I just become so upset. But you guys always put me back on track with some good perspective, which I love. But like, when you played college ball and you were struggling, like what did you feel like was your best way to bounce back and go kind of from that, like you're going to all of a sudden you're like stuttering? Like how did you bounce back up instead of go like down deeper?
Man, I think just like investing in other people, honestly, I would say that was like my saving grace. And not to say that I think I went about my college experience, I feel like I had a lot more failures than I did successes to like a certain extent. But like when I really do look back, like I'm proud of the sense that, I felt like I really was a good teammate and I was there for other people, because like, just because, I'm going through it to a certain extent, right? It's like, you don't have to necessarily like bring other people down with you. Now, where I feel like I faulted is I don't think I had enough conversations. I think I internalized things way too much. And that was a big problem for me. Like that was a struggle.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have, I feel like I couldn't go to certain people at the time that were like older. I'm not saying teammates specifically, but then I still remember like, the conversations that we would have like in the clubhouse, and you'd come over to me. And I feel like that's really like, for people that don't know, I mean, Rutsch and I, we grew up together. We grew up in Sherwood, Oregon. We played sports together, but there's an age difference. So it's like we were in different classes.
Yeah. We weren't like friends.
Right.
Like,
yeah, we were always on the same sports team.
Yeah. Like,
but then it's like when we got into college, it's like I feel like that's where our relationship really blossomed, because
it was like I had been around you so much that like I knew you well, even though like we weren't like really good friends. But I remember like our kind of that turning point in our friendship was like when we started asking, like when you knew something was off. Like I remember like one day we were driving to the field and I knew something was off, and I'm like, ZT, you gotta tell me, man, you're killing me. What's going on? And you're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, dude, I can tell something's like off. Like
100%.
And you're like, what?
Yeah.
And you had no idea. And I'm like, dude, I can tell. Like, I know.
Well, and the best part about that though is like even that, without going too far into detail, but it didn't even have to do with baseball. It had to do with a relationship that I was going through at a time.
Yep.
And so I think now we're really good at that. As far as the conversations that we have, I mean, shit, our conversations, they're rarely about baseball.
Yeah.
Like, I see what you do all the time. I know that when we have a conversation, that's the last thing that you want to talk about.
It's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing in any clubhouse, I think.
Because you do it every single day. You're doing the same thing every single day. And then on top of it, you got to perform at a really high level against the best in the world. So the last thing that you want to do when you have a 5, 10, 20-minute conversation is talk about baseball.
You need a release.
You literally need a release.
You need a release. And that's exactly it too. But those are the things that kind of build that team, like that team aspect, like you're saying, like just going up to guys and like asking them how they're doing, because no one really wants to talk about baseball a whole lot, because you're doing it for 10 hours a day. Like,
right.
Guys have so much else going on in their lives. Like, when you're really building that like team chemistry and stuff, like that's what you're doing is you're asking them like how they're doing and like how you can help.
Yeah.
And like you said, investing in your teammates sometimes is the best way to like get out of your own head.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I feel like when I'm in a rut, exactly what you're saying, like I start focusing so much on what I have going on and my problems that I stop pouring into other people.
Yeah.
And like at that point, then you start to reflect and you're like, I'm just being selfish at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what have I done?
Yeah.
To like help someone else today. Like I've just been so focused on like my struggles.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think the last thing I want to really touch on as far as just venting in the conversations that we have is I remember going through a period and it was like really short and it never changed like my own perspective like on our friendship. But you coming up, you're in the big leagues, and I remember we would get on calls and I started to realize I was like, man, because there was a point I was like, man, what if I can't relate to like what you're doing? And then I realized I was like, you know what, I can't relate to a certain extent of like what you're doing, you know, physically every day because I'm not in the big league level, I'm not in the clubhouse. Mm-hmm. But I was like, man, one of my greatest assets like to you as a friend is just literally the ability to listen, because I think at certain points in times, it's not like I'm trying to give you advice or I'm trying to necessarily like fix your problems. It's really just I caught myself. I was like, man, if I can be a good listener for him, like he might not have that right now in maybe that certain aspect, and he needs to come to me about something and just vent. And I need to be a soundboard for him, and then we can chop it up. Because like what you said earlier, it's like I don't necessarily have an emotional response, and you know, at the end of the day too, like I'm not worried about your image. I'm not worried about anything like that. Like I love you to death because you're my best friend. I could care less if you're done playing baseball tomorrow. And I truly mean that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that, you know, especially our friend group in general, like, and especially us, like having played baseball, you put that aside because you care about the person and you don't care about, like, I don't care about the baseball player that Adley Rutschman is. That's just something that you do. That's your vehicle. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to get into that later as far as like identity and purpose. But I just think that's important to note, and I want people to hear is just the ability to listen to the people in your inner circle, because it does wonders, because you know that I'm truly invested in what you're doing and what you're saying.
Absolutely. And the fact that I know that every single one of my friends, whether I have an 0 for 3 day with 3 punch outs, or if I quit baseball tomorrow, mm-hmm. or if I go 4 for 4, like you guys are going to view me the same.
Yep.
I can rely on you guys to like make me laugh. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, to me, like what's going to be more consistent than anything in regards to baseball.
Absolutely.
You know,
and it's so funny. I think of like our group chat's going right when you're going off and there's highlights, but our group chat is going when you have that 0 for 4 day and you strike out. George hops on Snapchat and he's just roasting you, making a video. Yeah. And then everyone hops in and we're roasting you, but we're doing it in a loving way. Like we just like, you need that, you know?
Well, I just remember like honestly, it started in college where like, if one of us punched out and we'd be in the dugout afterwards, like if you were pouting for more than like 8 seconds in the dugout, you could honestly rely on one of us to go up to the other and be like,
you're getting roasted at that point.
Yeah, you're like, are you going to pout all day?
Yeah.
Like,
that
no, like you're really fun to be around.
And you know, there's one of us that like they're kind of like they're up in the dugout, arms crossed, pissed off, and we would get on both sides, and our just ears are like we're right in their ear.
It would be like you and George, you and Verb.
Yeah,
you guys. Someone's coming up to you and saying, "Hey, like, better stop this because like you're like really depressing everyone out."
Yeah. Like, don't bring your struggles on everyone else right now.
I feel like you're really bumming everyone out right now.
Yeah. Like, oh, that was a really shitty swing right there.
Yeah. Like, hey, like.
But that's the way to deal with it, though, honestly, because at the end of the day, like, even what you're doing, like, it is, like, yes, it's a job, and there's way more on the line. Don't get me wrong. Like, this is your livelihood. But it's like, it is still a game. You have to poke fun at yourself. You're playing a sport where you're going to fail more than you succeed.
Yes, absolutely. And you have to be able to deal with it too. Mm-hmm. And like that was like part of the way we dealt with it.
Absolutely.
And it was also the way we bounced back too, because that's the thing is even so, like even if we got a little like pissed off, mm-hmm. like when someone would say like that or chirp us after a strikeout, like at the end of the day, like you got to be ready to go into your next AB like with a clear mindset. And I felt like that was a good way to like snap you out of it, like right then and there. Like, hey, like my friends, it was a way to immediately know that my friends care about me. Like they still have my back, and like I can go out and play defense the next inning and have a clear head, and like then go into my next AB and like be good to go.
Absolutely. And I feel like even the best part about that team, just speaking on in college in general, like clearly we had some really talented players, like a lot of first round picks. But it's like I think about even from like my perspective, you know, like it was so much fun to play with that group because of one, the chemistry, and like it was never, I never felt like, oh man, I have to do this in this moment. And if I fail in this moment, like, you know, I'm devastated. Like, it's like truly like we did have 9 guys that like, man, and maybe I didn't get it done in this moment, but it's like, okay, like, you know what I'm saying? It helps me like not pout and not be down because it's like, man, next guy up, like it's fine.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was that culture that, you know, was created there.
Yeah. It's kind of why I always get asked about like our 2018, 2017, like our college teams at Oregon State were unbelievable. But it's not like the guys who came in there, like we didn't have like a bunch of draft picks like come into like Oregon State. Like they came out like top end guys, but like I mean, what do you think made for that like that winning culture essentially? You know, like what like at the root of it, you know, like what do you think? Because everyone asks, they're like, how do I create a winning culture in my team? Like how do I create the sense of leadership and pride and just the will to win almost? Like how do I instill that in my guys? And like I mean, I want to hear your thoughts because it's tough to put into words sometimes.
I mean, that's where I think like I always try to tell people, I'm like, you know, I'm going to start with Case. There's like 2 answers to this, but I'm going to start with Case. Like I love Case to death. You have a great relationship with Case. You love him to death. He's someone that was an amazing motivator and of course, great coach, like legendary coach, but someone like I know for me personally, like would really like would at times like push me kind of past my breaking point, like really kind of broke me down to build me back up. But even at times when I didn't see it and I maybe didn't see the path, because you know, you're young, you're in college, like you kind of like you're just going with the flow every day. You're trying to do the best you can, but that's where he could intervene, and like he knew how to win at a high level and the competitiveness it took, and he knew also that it can't just be one guy. Like what you were talking about, like, yeah, we had our talented guys, but like, how do you get those role player guys that are really good at maybe the things that they need to do? And it's like, how do you get them to buy in? How do you get them to solely buy into their role? And I think that was the biggest thing is like everyone really knew their role and they weren't trying to do anything like bigger than, you know, what they were meant to do on the field. Yeah. So, and I think, but also the team chemistry though was like everyone truly enjoyed being around each other. Yeah. I can honestly say that.
There's so many different aspects to it too, like recruiting the right guys.
Yep.
Like Case pushing us like every day.
Yep.
To be better, but like also like when you got a guy who's breaking you down like that, if you don't feel like he's in your corner, like is like wants the best for you at the end of the day, like it's trouble to like it's tough to get behind someone like that. But the fact that like you knew that if like push comes to shove, like Case has your back.
Absolutely.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the respect you had for him is just more than anything, or more than any like coach that I've ever had.
Yeah. Well, and he was a guy, I mean, you know, like I think about our practices and like our team practices and like it was so much harder than a game. Like I legitimately felt way more pressure, way more stress, but he tried to cultivate that between him and Yeski and Bales. I will never forget, and this just happened to be later, and I had a really good postseason like my junior year. Like I played well. First game, because we were the opening game at Omaha, playing North Carolina. My first at bat, we were facing, I don't know his name, that lefty. I had a kind of a long at bat, and I got rung up on a borderline pitch, like up, and I swear to this day it was a ball. But I come back to the dugout, and I'm pissed off, like clearly, but I'm not like pouting, I'm not upset. I'm just like, dude, this guy like screwed me, like I'm pissed. Case asked me, meets me at the top, and I'm just like, you know, I'm like looking at him like this. I'm like, God, he's gonna chew me right here. Like it can't be, you know, you can't strike out looking right there. And he comes up to me and goes, that pitch up in the zone? And I go, 100% it's up in the zone. And he starts chewing that umpire out behind the plate. And I was like, yes, Case. And from then on, dude, I swear to God, that's what he like just set the tone. Yeah. And that was more just like, that's such a small moment, but it made such a big impact.
Yeah.
because we had so many moments, because that was something that I struggled with. Like my walk to strikeout ratio was not good. I didn't play for like 2 weeks during the season because I was trying to play like, I was hitting in the middle of the order. Like I want to do things that you and Trev were doing. When really it's like I needed to play my role, turn the lineup over, could handle the bat, do some different things. But I'll never forget that moment, and I still talk about it to this day because he was so fired up, came out of off the first step, was just chewing the umpire out. And like, you can't screw our guys over like that, this and that. And it's like, from then on, I knew. I was like, dude, I'm gonna rake, I'm gonna dominate. Like my confidence was like up here.
Yeah,
because he always would mix in, like he would be the hardest person on me because one, he knew he could, and like it was healthy because we would have moments like he would, he'd give me a hug, he'd tell me that he loves me. I still talk to the guy today anytime I call him.
Yep.
And there'd be months in between conversation, always, hey, Z, I love you, man, before we hang up. And I'm just like, that's the most powerful thing ever. That's the same thing we do too.
Absolutely.
Our whole, like people that you're close with, and I'm going to diverge just a little bit and I want you to speak on it, but like even telling the people that are close to you, just because life is crazy, like you never know what's going to happen. So at least the last thing you can leave that person with in your conversation, like if you're truly invested, I'm not saying you got to do this for everyone, but like, man, Rutsch, love you, man. Like I love you to death. Like I'll see you later. Like, because that's meaningful. That's the same concept of like, dude, what's up? Versus like how are you? Like, how, what are you going through right now?
Yeah.
Because you're invested.
Absolutely. And for me, like I say to like you guys, because I mean it.
Yeah.
And like that's one of the things that I love about our friend dynamic is just that I feel so comfortable with you guys that I can speak my mind. I can say that like and mean it, and like have you guys like reciprocate it. And just the fact that like the dynamic we have is we can be so like I guess goofy and just not serious and just chirping each other, and then the next second it can go to like, hey, like I really appreciate like the kind of person you are, and it gets really serious, and
for sure,
and then immediately back to chirping. But like I mean I need that, man. Like that's just like those are the kind of relationships, and honestly like just thinking about college, like kind of the wisdom that I mean Casey and Bailey like and Yeski, they said edit your life. Like that was a big thing.
Verb says that all the time.
He says it all the time, but like he loves it. Like I love it, and it's really is true because my friend group is so small, and the amount of people I talk to is so small. And like when I was going through college, I wanted to have like all these friends, and I wanted to be like buddy with everyone. But as soon as I got out of college and like got drafted and stuff, I just found that like my life started shrinking, and I liked it better. Like I felt more fulfilled, like having like a smaller friend group that has the kind of relationship that we do. And like it's crazy because I just don't talk to that many people, but like the people I do talk to, like I'm invested in.
Well, and like what you said too, you know it's reciprocated. Like that's the most important part. It's like you have, just like you're invested into someone, you want that, like that's what we need as human beings, right? We crave social interaction, even as much, like even if you're super introverted, right? To a certain extent, it's like your circle might just be smaller. But like I know for a long time I felt like I was super introverted. If we talk about like my college experience, it's like that's something I look back and I wish I would have spent more times like off the field. I wish I would have hung out with my buddies a little bit more.
Yeah, which is crazy too because you're so social. Like, you are such like when you're with people. You're the most social person and like the most people person. But like that was you had different aspects of your life, and so like when you're with people you're with, and when you're doing other stuff, like you're invested in that. Yeah,
but I think, I mean, also I think part of it's like just life experiences, and I think that's where the game of baseball I think is really a blessing because baseball is one of the best sports ever, especially at the professional level. And I, played indie ball, so it's like that's different than what you're doing, but at the same time, it's what's not different is like the bus rides and the people that you're around. You're constantly in a situation where you're not particularly comfortable. You know what I'm saying? You're going through these small towns that otherwise you'd probably never go through. But I feel like there, it's like you really have a lot of deep thought and like you find out a lot about yourself. Absolutely. And that's where like my values, I think, started to shift. Like as I was playing, going through COVID, not having a year, and then it's like, I decided to play another year. And it's like, I realized, man, what's really important? It's like my close friend group is extremely important. When we go on vacation or we take a trip somewhere, we prioritize time to even like last weekend, just going to the beach, right? Before you dip out.
Yep.
It's like, that's a place that we really value and like to go. And what we've talked about, and I really want to touch on this, is materialistic things will always be there. If you're constantly like, I want this car, or I want this house, or I want this pair of shoes, it's like, it just keeps evolving to a certain extent. If those are things that you're chasing, because you're always going to be chasing. Versus experiences and actually time with people, it's like, for me, I think there's so much value in that, because those are memories that like I'm not going to forget. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think you have two categories of things. You have your goals, right? Like even winning a World Series in 2018, like that was a goal of ours. We achieved it, but that moment is there and gone in a second.
In a second.
And you can almost get into a weird state of like sadness when it's gone, because it's like you built up for 3 years in order to get up to that point where you win a World Series. And if you let that be your peak, then there's nowhere else to go but down.
So true.
And you can just go into this, wow, well, I've achieved what I want to achieve. What is there to look forward to?
Right.
And so I think you kind of separate that into, that's my goal, but like that's not where my sense of fulfillment or happiness comes from. And like you said, like it has to be something consistent, something that's always there. And if you don't have that, then you're kind of losing like your sense of why.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like I think like that was the biggest thing. Can I like talk real quick on the Boston thing real quick?
Oh my gosh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, like I was talking with Z, it was after the Boston series, so I played the first 2 games at home versus Tampa, and then the next 3 games in New York, and then we were in Boston for a 4-game set, and it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday day game, and then we had a Monday night game. So after the Sunday day game, I went to go see a movie, Top Gun, I think, Maverick, and after the movie, like I decided to just walk home. Like I walked like 25-30 minutes back, and I remember like sitting there, I was just in my own thoughts, and I was thinking to myself, like, I'm in the big leagues right now. Like my goal since I was a little kid was to be in the big leagues, and I'm sitting here and I'm not feeling a sense of fulfillment or just overt happiness for being here right now. Like I feel blessed, but I don't feel like it's making me happy being here, which is really weird.
Crazy, yeah.
Because it was like I have this goal, and I always thought that I always had this vision of once I get to the big leagues, then I'll be happy. Once I do this, I'll be happy. And it was the most like perspective I've ever had in my life of, wow, like I'm here, I'm doing what I want to be doing. I set this goal, I am doing it right now, and I'm not happy. And it was crazy because then I had to kind of rethink, okay, like where am I putting my value? And, I called you.
Yeah, you called me right away. I remember I was low-key kind of like, and we talk about listening, right? I was like just listening to you because I didn't know where you were going from the start. I could tell, though, your tone of your voice. Like, we're around each other all the time. I know when you're upset about something. Like, I know right away. Yep. And I could even sense it on the phone without physically looking at you. And I was like, man, okay, I'm just going to like let him talk. And you said that. And that was so profound for me. I think more than you know. Like in that moment, though, I was like, man, I really want to be here for this guy, But at the same time, I was just like, honestly, like that is something so hard. And it's like, I know you were down a little bit, but at the same time, I'm like, what a perspective to have. Like at such like I feel like our age, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, for me to see the vulnerability from you, as one of your best friends, like that was powerful. And I can't tell you like how much I appreciated that moment, because I feel like that was even a huge step, in our relationship. And it's like, I hadn't talked to you. Like we'll talk in certain periods, when your schedule allows for it. But like for you to open up and like, think of me even in that moment, I was just like, man, that means a lot. Like I really do appreciate it. And I think even in that same conversation, right? And again, I'll just touch on this and we'll go back to you. But like, I remember I was going through it with work too, feeling completely overwhelmed. I love the place I work at Roke, but I'm around very high level people. I thought, going to get into this role, I'm like, everything's going to be great. It's going to go smooth. When really I'm like, so overwhelmed. I'm feeling like I'm doggy paddling in the ocean right now. And I'm just, there's no land in sight. There's no island. There's no boat. And I'm just trying to survive kind of thing. So I think in that moment, it happened at such a perfect time. And I honestly felt like that conversation was meant to happen at that time for both of us.
Absolutely. And yeah, and kind of the second parts of that too is like at that point, like I was struggling, like hitting too. Like I was, I did not do good my first however long in the big leagues. But then to kind of go through the season and start to like do better and like reflect again and say like, okay, was that just like because I was struggling in baseball, or like because now I'm doing a lot better, and like am I happy now? And it was still the same thing. And it was like it felt like at points you go through the season and you're at the field for hours on end, like your whole day basically you're at the field, we're playing every day, and it feels like you go through these 2-3 week stretches where it's like you've just been so focused on baseball, it feels like the rest of your life has just like passed you by, and you're not like investing into anyone else. You're just like purely focused on yourself and your career, which is tough. But like for me to get a sense of fulfillment, I need to feel like I'm making a difference in other people's lives. You know
Absolutely,
what I'm saying? Yeah. Like if I'm just going through life and I'm just doing what I do and I'm just playing baseball and I'm doing that, like to me that's not helping other people. Like I want to be an influence. I want to help others. I want to ask other people how they're doing. And sometimes you just get so caught up in what you're doing that like you take a step back and you're like, oh geez, 3 weeks have passed by and what have I done to help someone else?
For sure. Absolutely.
So like that was kind of the little nugget I had from this last year was like really take a step back and reflect as often as I can and say like, okay, how am I going to help someone else today? Because baseball's tough as it is. Like how do I help my teammates and other people?
And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, and I think this is a great experience to touch on, but All-Star break last year.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking like, oh man, I don't know. I didn't know what you were doing beforehand before we started to talk about it, but I remember you sending a text in the group chat. Yeah, man. Like, and we had conversations about it. Like, dude, I think I'm gonna fly home. And like, how do you feel about like going to the beach? Like, how do you feel about going to Pacific City? And it's like that's what we did. And to me, like, such a good experience. I mean, that's a place. Like, if you talk about for our friend group, and it's so cool how it's evolved. Like, your parents' beach home. But a place for all of us, like we can all agree, we like to go there. We can hang out. We can really just have conversation. We play poker. It's really low key. It's not like we're going out and doing anything, but it's like, it's a sanctuary, really, a mental release somewhere and we can both talk about that. I know how you feel about it, but for me, it's like, man, something about being around bodies of water. Like, honestly, I can feel this release. I feel like I can get away from what I'm doing in my everyday life, and maybe those certain stressors in your everyday life. And it acts as a complete reset. I always know, even if I just spend a night there, it's like that next day, it's like you wake up, we have coffee in the morning, on the porch, and it's like we can see the sunset. And it's beautiful and it's amazing, and it's does wonders for me mentally.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. Like for me, like there'd be days during this off season I drive down and go down to the beach by myself, make a fire, and watch the sunset. And for me, I don't know what it is about that. Like I don't know if it's the place or just like I love watching sunsets for some reason. For me, seeing the sun go down is like, it's just like. It's so beautiful, and it just kind of like makes, it gives me the sense of like, wow, this like we're blessed to live in the place we live in. And like, I just can't ask for anything more. And any time that I feel like, wow, my problems are weighing me down, I look at that and I'm like, the world's so much bigger than us, like, than my problems. Like, and same thing going to the beach. It just feels like I can't, I'm escaping from like anything I have at home. I leave, I reset, I come back, and I'm like clear minded.
Yeah. I want to touch on a moment. I don't even know if you remember this, because I can only imagine like the situation that you're in, and I think you handle it and you have a great grasp over it, like as far as like just your situation in general and keeping things in perspective. And I think that's like been a big moment for you, like from the outside looking in, like as one of your friends. When we were at the coast during the All-Star break, there was a moment where there was all of us, we were kind of near the ocean. And I looked back, and by the way, if you don't know, Adley Rutschman loves making fires for whatever reason. Like that's like his thing. And it's like when we're in our friend group, we just know that he's going to build a fire at some point. He'll say usually like if we go to the beach, right, we're hanging out, we're doing something. Okay, he's like, well, maybe I think this is a good spot for a fire, and like let's start collecting wood. And like he just goes full freaking Boy Scout.
Yeah,
honest. But it's funny. It's we let him do it too.
I love it too.
You do love it. You do love it.
But
and
I
you
also
make good
love the
fires.
chirps. I love the chirps.
Yeah, so we chirp him about it, of course, because we have to, because like we think it's hilarious.
Yeah, it is funny.
So that's a hidden gem on Rutsch.
Well, I just have this mode where whether it's eating, making a fire, like when I get locked into something,
you're
like,
locked.
Like you can. Like,
oh, and he won't. There's no talking to this man. He's zeroed in on the task at hand.
I won't hear it.
Yeah, he won't hear it. He's doing his thing. He builds the fire, and then once he gets it going, he's so at peace that he's just like staring into the fire. Yeah. And we're still not talking to him for this point in time.
Yeah.
But okay, so that moment. Yeah, sorry, I had to say that though. But I remember looking back, and we're maybe like 50 feet away from you. I don't know. You built the fire. You're kind of sitting on the edge, and you're honestly just like, you're by yourself. No one else is around you, and you're really staring in the fire. And I thought about going over because we were all talking like, dude, it's like, is Rutsch doing all right? And I was like, kind of, I remember George saying something to me. He's like, I'm like, man, is he good? And I think he's like, yeah, I think he's good. He's just kind of, he's kind of chilling out. And I'm like, man, like, because I initially wanted to go over there, and then I was like, wait a minute, no. He like, I think he's really relishing this right now. Like you could tell that you were decompressing from just like everything, and that you were meant to be like, you were just meant to have that moment. And I feel like that's where I was like, I wanted to go talk to you and hang out with you, right? Because that's our time. You're about to fly out again. But I was like, dude, he just needs this like 10 minutes. Like I want to let him have this. And I'm just me watching you, like, sounds kind of weird like describing it, but it was powerful because I'm just like, man, seeing one of the homies, like what he's gone through, the things that he's done, and that he can just truly relax. And the fact that he even wanted to be here in this moment when you could have gone quite literally anywhere. Yeah. But again, it comes down to what we value. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The fact I was able to go home for All-Star break and make it out to the beach and like be in that moment, make a fire, watch the sunset. Like that to me, I was like, there's nothing else I'd rather like be doing right now than being with my boys at a fire, watching the sunset.
Exactly.
And hanging out. Like, so, I mean, to me, like, there's no better way I could have reset, like, to head into the second half of the season.
Yeah.
It was just crazy that I was able to do that because I've never, like, the past couple of years when I've been in the minor leagues, I haven't been able to come home. I've just been there for the entire season. So it was weird being home, like, during the middle of the year.
Yeah.
But.
Well, I guess moving forward into this year, off season's over. You ship out on Friday. I guess as far as like your perspective, and I want to combine these two, okay? This is gonna be kind of a loaded question, but your perspective and even like your purpose, like kind of what you talked about, what you learned about yourself this last year, right? It's feeling like, man, I can't get so caught up in my performances, good or bad. It doesn't really matter. They're both the same. And in the sense of like, of course you want to have good performances, but like that is not just going to equate to happiness, at least like long-term happiness, right? You get these short dopamine spikes and that's really it. So you talked about doing things for other people, like making it bigger than yourself. I guess, what does that look like if you took that into this year? Like, explain that. Are those like just those kind of side conversations showing that you're invested in people? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, even if like, let's say you have like a Hall of Fame career or something like that, like at the end of the day, like baseball's, you're going to be done playing at some point. So like, if that's all you have, then, and that's all that's going to make you happy, then you got a lot of your life to live that's going to be without baseball. Yeah. And so for me, like, I think the biggest thing I'm taking away or going into this year is trying to, I guess, reflect more on a day-to-day basis. Like, how am I pouring into other people? Like, what have I done for someone else today? And like, trying not to get into those 2-week, 3-week like segments where I look back and I'm like, oh geez, my life's just passed me by and I've just been focused on myself and my career. Yeah. So that's gonna be my goal going in this year, is just to try and reflect a little bit more on that particular aspect and try and feel like I'm having a good impact and good influence on other people. And the thing is, I think at the end of the day, like, all you can hope for is that, like, I've been blessed to play baseball. I've been blessed to be put at a high stage and play in front of a lot of like fans. you hope that like your play and the way that you carry yourself reflects in a way that makes other people ask, like, why does he do what he does?
Mm-hmm.
And like, why does he act the way he does? Like, why is he joyful in the way he plays? And you like, that's the impact I hope to have. And I hope people see that in the way that I play. So whenever I get a DM or something like that says, hey, like that supports that makes me happy as well, because you feel like you're having that impact. Because at the end of the day, like, baseball's going to fade, but the way you treat people, the kind of teammate you are, that's what I've noticed, like, people talk about in the clubhouse. Like, they don't talk about the way, like, I guess, I don't want to mention any names, but they don't talk about the way that someone like played or how good of a player they were. They talked about like the kind of teammate they were, good or bad. Whether they hit 350 or a Hall of Famer, they'll say this guy is the kind of person you want to be around. Like, once baseball's done, I'll have their back, anything they need. And so to me, that, like, I'll put that above the way I play any day of the week.
I love it, man. That's such a good perspective. That's a perfect note to leave on too. But just the identity piece, I feel like that's where, you know, we talk about this. Like, it is easy. Like, you can have the perspective that you have, right, and wanting to do things for other people. You can still catch yourself getting caught up in like the emotions, right? Even that roller coaster at times. Like,
Absolutely.
we're not just because we have a certain perspective and that we set out to do this. Like, we're not immune to.
No.
You know, like, our identity being wrapped up into what we do. And that's not just in baseball, that's in everything.
You feel those temptations all the time.
All the time.
To, like, how I do, it dictates my mood.
Yes. But it's like, that's where I think the awareness piece, and I feel like, you know, seeing you, the endless conversations that we've had about this last year, it's like, that's where I feel like I've really seen you grown as a person, is just the awareness piece. Because now it's not like, you know, like, there are going to be times that are really difficult, but it's like, I think you're going to have the ability to pull yourself, you know, kind of push your ego to the side and like get back on track with like, man, this is my true purpose and this is why I'm doing this, right? Because then it's like, that's what makes you feel good. That is more that permanent happiness, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day too, you know, like, I don't want to dive into religion or anything.
For sure.
For me, like, that is my driving, like, my driving goal, and it's constant, you know? So, like, that helps me a lot with baseball. And also, I think that's why you see like so many guys who in sports are like religious, because it's like, it's a constant, and like, guys are struggling so much and they're dealing with so much stress that, like, you know, if you don't have a backbone, then it's really tough to deal with things on your own.
Absolutely. Well, just, I think even the concept too, if you want to, like, a bigger lens, right, of like, it's not just about you at the end of the day. And I think that's really the essence of like what we kind of talked about today. Yeah, it's like, I think we shared more stories about our friend group, right, than you actually like playing baseball. But and
that's how it is, like, all the time with us. That's what we do.
This is just an extension of our conversations that we have. The only difference is, you know, we're in front of a camera and we got a mic. Like, that's it. But Rutsch, I do really appreciate you taking the time. It's so cool to hear this perspective. I think, you know, this is going to be a part of my purpose, and I'm so happy that you're my first podcast. The ability to have one of my best friends, and just like, we've been through a lot together for sure. You know, we've had ups and downs, but we always are able to come back together because we love each other. We care about one another, right? But yeah, again, I appreciate it. I wish you luck on the season. We're going to be in constant communication, but thank you for doing this, especially for the people too, like, to hear more of like an inside, more vulnerable look in what you shared. And so that is really important to note. And so I appreciate it, Rutsch, and I love you to death, man.
I love you too. It's weird because we're now going to go work out.
Yep. Now we're going to grind.
We're now going to.
Let's go.
Yeah. We're having this serious conversation, and now we're about to go.
Yep. Right after it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Right.
That's fire.